Good evening. This is Maestro Cotello with a Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite modcast. Today we have a 1v1 on Leviathan Hive. Excuse me. Our first player today is Texcalibur, the famous Sword of Legend, playing as Captain Diomedes, this red and blue Force Commander, tanky melee hero. Starts off with a chain sword. You can get several different weapons like a power sword, a thunder hammer, or a power fist. He functions as a melee deterrent. He also ties up ranged units, and he has some especially devastating things he can do later on with his teleporter pack or his power fist that can punch and disable vehicles. Tex's opponent is PhatE, playing as the Orc Warboss, also a tanky melee hero, and definitely similar in quite a few ways. He's a tanky melee hero, so he's a melee deterrent. He is also very good at tying up ranged units, and he cannot be knocked down or suppressed, and he has similar health to the Force Commander, so I'd say more similarities between the Warboss and the Force Commander than, say, either of them have with, like, the Chaos Lord or the Hive Tyrant. So we have the Force Commander versus the Warboss. This is, both of these heroes, I think, are very, very good heroes. The Warboss in particular is definitely a tournament-proven hero, although, of course, that does have a bit to do with who has represented him. The Force Commander, not quite as successful, I think, at least not in the Retribution era, in the tournament scene, but still, in my opinion, a very good hero, and I think many players will definitely agree with that. Now, Tex has gone for the completely standard Scout build. The two Scouts is just very, very good in 1v1 for map control. I think some Space Marine players, Dark Riku in particular, may even say that the double Scout build is practically mandatory in 1v1 for the map control that you get out of it. But actually, what I'm more interested is PhatE's build, which is that instead of getting a second Shooter Boy, he's gotten a second Slugger Boy squad. So he has two melee units instead of two ranged units. And that's a very interesting play, considering it seems like it would be playing into the hands of the Force Commander. Melee units get countered by tanky melee heroes like the Force Commander. And this also means that PhatE won't have two ranged units that he can use to really kite and focus down the Force Commander. So it seems like it's playing into the Force Commander's hands. But on the other side of that, I think part of what this does is, first of all, we already see this shotgun purchase. In fact, we even have a double shotgun purchase, and that's going to delay Tex from getting out a fourth squad, whether that's assault, especially if it's Assault Space Marines. Although with the build that PhatE has gone, I would say a Devastator would probably make a bit more sense than an Assault Space Marine squad. And Tex has invested in these shotguns, and I think to some extent it was kind of necessary. I would say at least one was necessary and two was still desirable. Because with PhatE going with this build where he has two Slugger Boys, he really has a lot of power to push forward. The Space Marine opening has a lot of ranged units, but between two Slugger Boys and the relatively low DPS of Vulture Scouts, he won't really be able to stop two Slugger Boy squads just without the shotguns, basically. Alright, so we see that the Tactical Marines have now been upgraded to have a Flamer, which I think is a good choice, considering we also see Burners on both of PhatE's Sluggers. So both of these players potentially looking to get Gen Bashes and really shut their opponents out of the tech race, which is definitely one of the strengths of the Flamer attack, as well as the strengths of Orcs in general. I would say Orcs, and especially the Warboss, very good at winning engagements early on and then punishing with a Generator Bash, and then that allows them, of course, to secure a tech advantage. The Orcs do that in part because they really have high DPS on pretty much all of their starting squads, and then, of course, any kind of flame weapon is almost specifically designed to be good against generators. And with PhatE having two Slugger squads roaming around with those Burners, as long as he can catch the generators unguarded for a little bit, or even if he can win an engagement, he can really wipe out an entire power farm. Tex has kind of given himself a little bit of that same ability by getting this Tactical Marine Squad with the Flamer. He just needs to make sure that he actually shoots with them. There they were idling for a little bit, and that idle time, I think, could have cost Tex a little bit. As it is, he did destroy that one generator we just saw right there, but I think if he had kept the micro up on that Tactical Marine Squad, he probably could have taken out both of them. And PhatE, since he only has one Sluggaboy squad, so he's already gotten the Slugga Knob. Not as common to see those Slugga Knobs in tier... I mean, not Slugga Knob, Shoota Knob in tier 1. Since generally the big shooters are a better upgrade for actual damage and versatility with the aiming what's that ability. But right now I think PhatE wants to maximize the range DPS that he's getting out of this one Shooter Boy squad, since that's literally his sole source of range DPS, aside from, I guess, the twin-linked Shooter that's also coming out of the Warboss, but that is relatively insubstantial. So we actually do have Assault Space Marines from Tex. Looks like there they even had For the Emperor on them. That's a global ability from the Force Commander that increases damage by, I believe, 25%. And again, it is a little curious, actually, to see that purchase, considering I think PhatE really has what he needs to counter-initiate against the Assault Space Marines. Of course, the Assault Space Marines, with their knockback and disruption on landing, they can actually, in a way, be used to soft counter Sluggaboys. If you actually directly target the Sluggaboys, the Assault Space Marines will get a little bit of an early advantage because the Sluggaboys will be disrupted. Especially if you combine that with For the Emperor, or if you also have Shotgun Scouts that can run up and further disrupt those Sluggaboys. The Assault Space Marines can actually be used against the Sluggaboys, and that really contrasts with, say, the Raptors, which don't have any don't disrupt on landing; they suppress instead, which makes them a bit worse. The Raptors that are against other melee units. Now, Tex, very interestingly, has also chosen to get the Power Sword, and this is one of the less common warrior upgrades for the Force Commander, mainly because of the versatility and utility of the Tier 2 weapon upgrades for the Force Commander, the Power Fist and the Thunder Hammer, of course. So even though this is a good weapon, this Power Sword is a good weapon, most players will forego it, save the resources, so that they can get one of those Tier 2 weapon upgrades. Now, of course, the Power Fist, the Power Sword, in addition to having 50 DPS power melee, it also increases the bonus of the Battle Cry buff ability to 15% instead of 10%. So it's a bigger damage buff, and of course you get a more powerful weapon. And it's hard to complain about a 50 DPS power melee weapon. This would particularly be good against power armor, other power armor races, but it can still work out just fine here, especially with the buff you'd be giving the Assault Marines. I think they even have For the Emperor as well. So For the Emperor, as well as, well, actually Battle Cry hasn't been activated. But basically, Tex is actually using the buffing capabilities of the Force Commander, not just the melee tie-up capabilities, he's actually using the buffing capabilities of the Force Commander. And we see that this Force Commander is already level 3, but I think part of the issue that Tex may have to deal with right now, or one of the reasons why players often don't get this Power Fist, the Power Sword, is that now we have this early vehicle out on the field. We have the Death Dread, and Tex just got the Power Sword, so he spent the resources on the Power Sword. So the question is, will he want to switch over to the Power Fist now to deal with this Death Dread? And ideally, he probably should, because he needs something to deal with this Death Dread. The Death Dread is in particular a vehicle that you can't ignore for too long, because it is a vehicle that also happens to have flamers on it. So it is very good at capitalizing on precisely the kind of advantage you get for rushing a vehicle and having a vehicle that is unopposed. And we see that right now, which is that it's burning down an entire generator farm with those burners. So I feel like Tex really can't afford to leave this Death Dread alive, and at the very least, he really can't afford to leave it uncountered. Already, we see the missile launcher on the Tactical Marine. We see that the Assault Space Marines have also been upgraded to Thunder and Lightning so that they have their Burner Bomb. And that's a very good emergency AV pairing that you can get out of any Space Marine hero. But the Force Commander has that Power Fist option, which is incredibly good as anti-vehicle. Really, it's really one of the, I'd say, one of the strongest Commander War Gear options in the game, because of how much it limits those vehicle plays. And if you think about it, a lot of heroes don't quite have that, especially with, you can even combine it with that Assault Space Marine Melta to even get an even harder snare, because the Melta is, of course, a snare, and then then Flesh Over Steel from the Power Fist is, of course, its own snare. Now, Tex so far has not changed weapons, so it looks like he may be choosing to keep the Power Fist because he's already committed to it, and he does have some AV, so he can handle the Death Dread. But if he had the Power Fist, he would really, really threaten that Death Dread to the point where its chances of staying alive become much, much slimmer. So it looks like Tex might try to deal with that Death Dread just with the Missile Launcher and the Melt-A-Bomb. That's going to be a lot tougher because there are still two Sluggaboys that can run up and tie up his Tactical Marines. And Tex really needs his Tactical Marines to be able to basically to not get tied up at all. Because while the Assault Space Marines do that snare, which is very important, the Assault Space Marines can't take out the Death Dread alone. They really need that Tactical Marine Missile Launcher follow-up. Looks like here they are going to throw their Melt-A-Bomb, which will do some damage, but unfortunately Tactical Marines are out of position. They are off capping. It may have been better for Tex to actually have the Tactical Marines capturing this VP while the Force Commander was over capturing that power point, since that would have had a better chance of allowing the Tax to stop capping. They probably would have even finished capping because they capture faster, and as well as follow up against that Death Dread. Because right now he's not going to be able to take out that Death Dread with these Sluggaboys right here. Again, they're just going to tie up the Tactical Marines, and if he lets the Sluggaboys get that close, they may even take out a few models. So Tex does appear to be struggling right now with this, and I think things are going to get even worse for him, in part because he suffered that Gen Bash as part of being rushed with that Death Dread. So he's probably going to be behind in tech. And then already we see a second Tier 2 purchase out of PhatE. He now does have this Weirdboy, and there has been some discussion about how good it is against Imperial Guard on a recent video or a recent cast that I did, and it's really good. The Weirdboy is really good in any matchup. And what this Weirdboy is going to do, a lot of the things he can do and the things that PhatE should do with him right now, is of course use that Warp Vomit ability to control the Force Commander, and probably more importantly the Assault Space Marines right now, since the Assault Space Marines are the ones that are going to be putting that Melta on the Death Dread. If he can hit them with Warp Vomit before they get to do the Melt-A-Bomb, that will be very, very powerful for PhatE, since that will probably mean that he will win the engagement, and the Death Dread will probably not only get to stay alive, but be roughly unopposed. He can also use the basic attack, or even just the Warp Vomit, to stun the Tactical Marines. And that, of course, prevents the only source of stable damage against the Death Dread from actually doing any damage. And already, this is a losing engagement for Tex. It's actually a terrible engagement now with that knockback. The Assault Space Marines did use Merciless Strike, but they really should have retreated immediately after that. And unfortunately, this is just not working out well enough for Tex. He does have a flank with his scouts, and he should go for a grenade to take out that Weirdboy. Unfortunately, he misses the opportunity with the grenade. He does take out one of the Sluggaboy squads, which is a nice little victory for him, especially on top of the fact that he took out the Weirdboy. But we still have this Death Dread that's now level 2 and has not been adequately dealt with. So I think Tex tried to basically just go without that Power Fist, and at this point I think he really should switch. Like, if he switched right now, he would be in a good position with this Death Dread basically isolated. He could probably hit it with Flesh Over Steel and then get it out of there alive. He's not doing that, though. I messed up my words. Hit it with Flesh Over Steel and then actually take it out just with the follow-up hits from the Power Fist. Now, PhatE has... Oh, wait. PhatE did not lose one of his Sluggaboys. He lost his only Shooter Boy squad, so he has very little range DPS. Tex is now trying to return the Gen Bash, but unfortunately it's a little bit too late. These scouts are not Gen Bashing as fast, and now they're getting threatened by that Weirdboy. And I think more importantly, PhatE has already made it to Tier 3. He's going for a looted tank, and the Razorback is really going to be in a lot of trouble against the looted tank. The Razorback is no match for the looted tank, and it's really, really hard actually to keep a Razorback alive, or any transport for that matter, once a tank out on the field, unless you have enough AV to stop it. And I think especially this looted tank is a good play because of the fact that Tex already is having enough trouble dealing with this one vehicle, this Death Dread, and this Death Dread is already level 2. We're throwing a second vehicle on top of that, and Tex does not really have enough AV. He only has very minor sources of AV. And I mean, I like the Tactical Marine Missile Launcher and that Melta Bomb. They are good, but they are definitely emergency AV just when you're in that situation at the start of Tier 2 where you need something. And those are just really convenient options that most races don't even have. But in the long run, we're now into Tier 3. Tex is going to need a little bit more as far as AV goes. He already hasn't been able to take out the Death Dread, and to deal with the looted tank as well, that's going to be a problem. And I think it's he especially should get that Power Fist, because if we think about his other options, we're mainly talking about a Devastator. The problem with a Devastator is that mainly right now it's going to be very easily disrupted by the Weirdboy, very easily rushed, flanked, and even wiped out entirely by these dual Slugger Boys as well. And oh, that's another terrible situation. So that Weirdboy being very, very good. One Tactical Marine model went down. Maybe we'll see another one. Nope. But the Tactical Marine's now in trouble. They're at level 3, so their missile launcher will be doing a little bit more. But they still don't have quite enough. And Tex right now trying to stick it out with his Power Sword. And he may just be experimenting, trying to see what he can do with the Power Sword. I know he likes to do that, and I know he likes the Power Sword, and he has made replays in the past, kind of celebrating the strengths of the Power Sword. But in this case, I think he really, really needs that Power Fist. He's going for a Dreadnought. Now, the Dreadnought, I think, would do fairly well against the Death Dread, especially when combined with the Melta Bomb from the Assault Space Marines, as well as that missile launcher from the Tactical Marines. But the problem with that Dreadnought is mainly this looted tank. The Dreadnought should not really be able to actually get to the looted tank, while the looted tank should be able to, in a very stable way, DPS down that Dreadnought. So this is a situation, yet again, we see, I mean, he came close to taking out that Death Dread, and he was chasing it down. He did get that Melta Snare. The Death Dread was a little bit overextended, but again, we see those double Slugger Boys are running in and tying up those Tactical Marines before they can finish off this Death Dread. The Death Dread is now at 18 health. The Death Dread needs to get out of there before it gets hit another hit. As it is now, the looted tank needs to be microed. And even the looted tank is going to get out of there just fine. The looted tank even has enough room to actually take a few shots at that Dreadnought. Oh, one of the other things I didn't mention before about this double Slugger play is that it could have been foreshadowing that PhatE may have wanted to go for some kind of vehicle-heavy play, since you get 2 repair units. And 2 Sluggers is generally not very typical for Orcs, but if you wanted to go for a vehicle-heavy play for Orcs, it would make sense because you get 2 repair units. And if PhatE only had 1 Slugger Boy squad, the effectiveness of these vehicles would be much, much less because he wouldn't be able to get them back out on the field as much after taking all this damage. We have Knobs coming out on top of that. I think Knobs, it's interesting to see Knobs right now because Knobs, if anything, are pretty well countered. Actually, the main thing that there are plenty of sources of disruption to stop those Knobs right now. We have double shotgun scouts. We also have the Dreadnought, but the Dreadnought needs to be very careful because the Dreadnought can't actually fight the Knobs. I don't consider the Dreadnought a counter to Knobs. I think some people have said that before. The main thing that's nice about the Dreadnought is that, of course, that Emperor's Fist ability, which can stun the Knobs, and then if you follow that up with something, that can be very powerful against the Knobs. But the Dreadnought by itself, if anything, I would say gets countered by the Knobs. because it's more likely that if you leave a Dreadnought in against the Nob squad by itself, I think the Nobs will come out on top, particularly once they get more upgrades. The issue with these Nobs, this is also another reason, another problem with that power sword. He got the power sword, which is not ideal for dealing with these Nobs. If the ideal counter for those Nobs would be the Thunderhammer. And now we're in two situations where Tex would be better off if he had a different weapon than the one he currently has for his Force Commander. But now we have different units that demand different weapons. For the vehicles, he would rather have the Power Fist. And for the Nobs, and also for these double Slugger Boys, he'd really have that Thunderhammer. Now, Tex has been staying in the game on VPs, but he is at a clear tech disadvantage by only being in tier, basically by only being in tier 2. Now, he did actually take out the looted tank quite amazingly, but this Death Dread is still alive at level 3. I think that the Death Dread has really stayed alive much longer than it should have. Now, there's plenty of support for this Razorback here with its scouts, with their shotgun blast, but I'm actually really concerned now that the Razorback might be in a bad position, backed up against the wall. I hope it's not. It did not put it in a situation where it can't path out of there. It looks like it will get out of there. It also has the reinforced plating just to give it a little more survivability. And so we see right here the Power Sword is disrupting and doing knockback to these Nobs, but of course the Thunderhammer would be better because he would be getting that 360 disruption. If we see the way this Power Sword is working out right now, he's only disrupting 1 or 2 models at a time. And this is actually going to be the end of that Dreadnought, so already we see, again, I think this Dreadnought did not have full health going into this engagement, but it actually did use that Emperor's Fist ability. The Force Commander was also disrupting them, but in the end, that ended up with the Dreadnought going down. And he says bad call. I even think the Dreadnought purchase may not have been a great one. If anything, I actually think like another Scout Squad would have been a better purchase.
We shall make it so.
Actually, maybe not. Well, yeah, I kind of do actually think that, since that would give him another way of controlling the Nobs much more cheaply with less risk. And then I think one of the other considerations of getting Nobs, again, it seemed like a weird purchase because it seemed like Tex had plenty of things to counter that. But I think it kind of screws Tex up because he already is having trouble countering the vehicles. And if you're piling Nobs on top of that, that's just going to make things a lot tougher.
We are suffering heavy losses.
And the Nobs have basically been running a train ever since they've been here. And we have a Death Dread that's almost to level 4. It has definitely lived much, much longer than it should have. PhatE is actually only down to 40 VPs, but again, he's generally had the advantage as far as, well, he's definitely had the tech advantage.
Our fortifications are under assault.
So, and Tex obviously knows about the Power Fist, but I think he really just wanted to try using the Power Sword and trying to see if he could make it work. Unfortunately, I think the answer is, at least in this game, it did not work out too well because I think a different weapon choice would have kind of changed, would have the potential to change the game. And he's not exactly out of it yet. He still has a VP lead, but it's about to be a triple cap in PhatE's favor. Now, I think we're going to have, this has to be a drop pod that's going to reinforce these Assault Space Marines. But did we also just have, I'm pretty sure that was a call to boys from the Warboss as well. So Tex is not winning that engagement. The Attachment Marines are level 4, in fact, but and they even use their They Shall Know No Fear ability. Unfortunately, this is really bad positioning for the Razorback. Now, And then another reason why these knobs, I think, are doing so well, aside from the fact that it's just too much stuff for Tex to deal with when he's already been having trouble with the Death Dread, is that although Tex has invested in several sources of knockback, he's had many sources of disruption, whether it was that Dread when it was still alive, the Scout shotguns, or, of course, the Force Commander himself. He hasn't really had enough to do as far as damage goes to those knobs. And he did ultimately take 3 models over there, but that took a very long time. Looks like the Scout Squad will go there, stalling out the cap. Only 1 VP left for Tex. Oh. And there goes a Weirdboy shot. So Tex loses a Scout Squad. Just stalling out that VP timer. That was the only thing he could do to stay in the game. And he even, wow, manages to stop the capture from these Slugga Boys. And I think Tex will maybe finally take out this level 4 Death Dread. And it's actually now a single cap in Tex's favor. And these Tactical Marines, I swear, they've been there for a while. They just need to take a shot at that Death Dread. I think they've maybe been tied up the whole time. Finally, that Death Dread goes down. It's actually a 1-0 cap in Tex's favor with only 1 VP left for him. I think he will finish off this Slugga Boy squad, hopefully for him. But at the same time, he might even lose his Tactical Marines. They have activated They Shall Know No Fear again, but they lost their Sergeant. And I think we'll see the end of that Slugga Boy squad. It's now a no-cap game, but PhatE is going to be threatening a triple cap. He won't even need a triple cap. He just needs to get 1. And then that'll be the game for him, and I think it'll be the game for him right here. So that was the end of the game. And a lot of the things I said, I almost wonder, like, did this entire game not go in Tex's favor because he chose not to get that Power Fist and chose to stick it out with that Power Sword the entire game, his only piece of war gear. Tex does a lot of experimentation, and I know he likes this Power Sword, but again, part of the issue with that Power Sword is that it's generally ignored in favor of options that are just better in the long run. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.